I'm so excited to be here today with Vallery Lomas, who you might know from her blog, Foodie in New York, or you might know her from the Great American Baking Show, which she won. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So as the winningest baker in all of America, we're gonna have you teach us something that's actually seems basic, but is really difficult for people, including myself, which is how to make a lattice crust. So why is a lattice crust so important as like a basic pie skill?
Right, so a lattice crust, it's great for fall pies like apple pie or pear. Today we're gonna do pear ginger. And it's nice because it just makes a double crusted pie a lot more festive.
So we have our crust, and you've kind of built the pie here. This is,
Yes.
talk to me about this pie that you've made, because it's like
Yeah.
the creative genius of a pie.
So this is just the basic pie dough we're gonna use, and then I've sliced and peeled some pears, and I added a ton of ginger and a little cinnamon and sugar and cornstarch, and I just mixed it together, and I topped it off with some butter.
Perfect. So we've got our pie kind of at the ready.
Yes.
And of course, the most important thing to start with when you think of that original pie is like, don't just fit the pie crust to your pie pan, because you really need that overhang to get the lattice later.
Exactly. We want to save a little bit of crust around the edges so that when we do add the lattice, we'll be able to kind of pinch them together.
So we're starting with dough that you've made.
Yeah, this is just regular pie dough. And actually, if you don't like to make dough, you can buy these ready-made rounds of dough,
Yeah.
which are great to press into a pie pan. And I mean, the thing about a lattice crust is it uses a little bit more pie dough than regular crust because you actually have 2 layers of dough.
Right.
So it depends on, you know, how close your strips of pie dough are together. That's going to determine how much crust, how much pie dough you'll need.
There's too thick and there's too thin. Like, how do you find the right middle ground?
Right. So, I mean, I typically go for like 1/8 to 1/6 of an inch thick for lattice. I might do it a little bit thicker because I want to be able to easily work with it. Whereas like with a pie dough, you know, you can kind of easily get it into that.
We've got a few contraptions
Yes.
here. Like from extremely serious to like not serious at all.
Right.
Like, what do you like to use when you're making a lattice crust?
Right. So, I mean, I like to use this guy because you can easily get the same size strips really quickly.
And what is that called for those?
Yeah, this is called a bicycle cutter. It's really a great tool. I also use this guy just because I can.
Just like a regular pizza cutter. Like
Yes.
if you make pizza at home, like you can also now use it for your crust.
Right. And another way, you can take a ruler or you can eyeball it and just use a knife and just cut through. We'll just use this because
it's the best.
It's here.
If we're gonna use the best, we're gonna use our bicycle.
Just gonna lightly roll. So now that we've got our strips done, we're gonna put our first layer down on top of the pie. So we've got 12 or 14 strips. So we know that we can do 6 to 7 strips for each layer, because you have to remember it's double layered, right?
Yeah, so math.
So the first layer is the easiest. We're literally just gonna lay the strips on top of our lovely pie filling. So now for the second layer. So this is, we're gonna take our first strip, and we're gonna, instead of laying it directly on top, we're gonna flip half of these over. So every other strip we're gonna flip over, okay? So we'll start here, then we'll take the next second strip, and then the next second strip. And then we're just gonna
Just lay it across. And the big thing to remember here also is, like, you know, as you've added flour at the bottom, like you don't wanna have a super sticky dough for this as well, because you won't be able to pull them back. I mean, that's another like
exactly
piece of this that, you know, is necessary. So now you're just folding them.
So now I'm just folding them back over. And now we're gonna repeat this, but we're gonna change the strip that we flipped, okay? And we're actually gonna go to the other side because it's gonna make it easier for us. So now we're gonna flip this guy over.
Like gingerly. And for those who are saying,
Yes.
like, oh my God, I would break mine, like you can literally just surgically put them back together if the dough breaks, right?
I just broke one.
Right.
I broke one and I was just like, oh, it's long enough, it's fine.
Right, like,
I don't even need to do anything.
Right.
So now we're gonna just repeat the same on this side, and then again, every other strip.
And while we're latticing, tell me
Yes.
a little bit about your blog and what people can find there.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my blog is Foodie in New York. I'm also on Instagram, and I blog about just different things I like to bake. I grew up in Louisiana. I spent a lot of time living in France, California, and now New York. So I've kind of been inspired by a lot of different cuisines from all over. So I'm just gonna kind of trim these, and you don't even have to use scissors, you can use a knife. But just because some of them are long. The fun thing about these pies is you can really jazz them up with the edges. I brought a few little cutters. Those are some leaves, and you can just decorate the pie, and you can go wild with it. With your extra dough, you could do anything. You could make a rope, you could make a braid and place it around the dough. We'll just make a few leaves. You don't have to make that many. Whatever you want.
Don't worry, we won't make you do too much of this.
So I'm just gonna kind of fold the rest of the little edges that are here, give them a fold under. As far as the edges for the crust, you could take a fork and just kind of pinch them together. You can use your fingers and pinch them together. And once this is all done, I like to stick the pie in the freezer for at least 10 or 15 minutes. So that way when it bakes, we're gonna prevent the dough from shrinking too much because we've kind of let it rest. And it'll be nice and cold. And this is great actually to make ahead. You can make this, and then when you're ready, just stick it in the oven frozen. I often, if you come to my house, you will find frozen pie that has not yet been baked. So yeah, I just did a quick little, using my knuckles and fingers, and we've got these beautiful leaves that Allie made. And especially if you have any parts maybe along the edges that aren't quite perfect, and you think they don't look quite perfect, you can just add a few leaves or whatever cookie cutters you've used. We can actually brush on a little heavy cream and sprinkle with some sugar, and then we'll actually be ready to bake it.
And why heavy cream? You know, obviously with pies, there's like people who like eggs, people who like cream. Like, why heavy cream is your choice?
Yeah, I mean, I like to make things in my life easier, and I often will already have cream on hand. So instead of having to go through and crack an egg and make an egg wash, this is just so much easier. And the great thing is, like, as it's in the oven, it's going to give it that nice brown, glossy, beautiful finish. And that's another great thing about sprinkling it with sugar. It just adds that texture and dimension. I chose not to put heavy cream around the edges just because the edges will often bake faster. So I kind of want them to brown slower than everything else. Oh, that looks beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it.
Unparalleled sugar skills. Perfect.
That's
and when
it.
you put this in the oven, you get a pie with this kind of crust. Vallery, thank you so much for coming in and showing us how to make a lattice crust. And obviously, if you want more of her tips, of which there are many, you can go to foodieinnewyork.com.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allie.